Peace be with you. Dear friends, we are in the second Sunday of Lent. This is a very significant Sunday that helps us to meditate on the transfiguration of the Blessed Lord. In Christian spirituality, climbing a mountain has a very powerful significance of encounter with God. In the Old Testament, we find references to Moses on Mount Sinai, references to Mount Sinai, Zion, Mount Tabor, Mount of Olives, Mount Moriah, Mount Ararat, Mount Nebo, and Mount Carmel, where Prophet Elijah offered sacrifice to the living God, and then his encounter with God on Mount Horeb. Prophet Isaiah and Prophet Micah predicting that the Mount Zion will be the highest mountain and all nations will go up to that mountain to worship the living God. In the life of Jesus, on various occasions, we find references to mountains, the Mount of Beatitudes, the Mount of Transfiguration, the Mount of Olives, Mount Calvary, and the mountain from where he ascended up to heaven. In the writings of saints, we find also references to mountains. For example, St. John of the Cross speaks of the ascent of Mount Carmel. And St. Teresa of Avila writes about the interior castle in some way can be related to a mountain because the castles were built on mountains to keep away from enemies. Now, what we find here, Jesus climbs this mountain. Climbing the mountain is a comparison that can enlighten us. We climb always. We grow old and we climb the ladder of knowledge. We climb up in status in our community and we climb up in reputation, and at times we climb up in our experience of God. All these things are very important. But there is one that is very essential, that is climbing the ladder of spiritual life. This climbing the ladder of spiritual life signifies also our effort at virtues, experiencing those virtues. Climbing is a tedious task. It requires energy, patience, and perseverance. We cannot climb up in our intellectual, spiritual, and moral life without efforts. One thing we need to keep in mind, we should never give up no matter what are the conditions we come across in our life. If you are aware, you will discover that climbing will ultimately illuminate your path. If you have an experience of climbing a mountain, you would discover that as you climb the mountain, you could view the area surrounding the mountain and you have a better perspective and you literally begin to feel that it is worth climbing and you feel refreshed and relaxed as you go up. Now, what we find here in this event of the transfiguration of Jesus, Jesus climbs the mountain together with his apostles. As Jesus climbs the mountain together with his apostles, this is an indication that life is a question of togetherness. In our parish community, we need to give up individualistic ways of life. When we become too egocentric, we cannot hope to climb together. We need a network of being united in our effort to grow up. We can never be satisfied with what we personally achieve. We need the community for any step we take in our life. The moment we take a step alone, we will have to be sure that in all that we experience, we will be alone. We can try our best to climb all together. Climbing signifies encouraging one another on the road to sanctity or holiness, love, and service. We can face trials and temptations provided we begin to share our deepest longings and intentions with others. Once Mother Teresa of Calcutta, now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, said, the biggest problem facing the world today is not people dying in the streets of Calcutta and not inflation, but spiritual deprivation. This feeling of emptiness associated with feeling separate from God and from all our sisters and brothers on planet Earth. Loneliness, she said, is like the leprosy of the modern times. She was talking about the pain associated with feelings of isolation and separateness. These feelings are common to mankind. They can overtake any one of us in a heartbeat, even in the very commonplace. And when we have an experience of loneliness, loneliness implies a lack of meaningful connection. For most people, it is a familiar traveling companion. Even when we are surrounded by people we know, we can feel separate and apart. Separate from what, we might ask? Well, separate from others, separate from ourselves, separate from the divine, separate from meaning of life, separate from love, separate from a sense of belonging. When we climb the ladder of our life, we need support and encouragement, and it can be obtained through our brothers and sisters around us. We need guidance and compassion. All these values will never come to us from the blue, but they come to us when we climb together. Now, the second step in this episode of Jesus is staying on the mountain. Here is a reference to our vocation, a call to prayer, to sacrifice, to self-denial, and holding on to the values of our life. Have you seen a farmer tilling the ground, waiting for rain, cultivating and expecting a good crop? That is what we call staying on the mountain. We all need to be like good farmers who have made patience a part of their life. They never give up. They get up early in the morning, work hard in the sun and rain. They feel one with the Mother Nature and they experience the joy of working at it. Have you seen a mother taking care of a baby? This is also a kind of staying on the mountain. What an amount of patience every moment of the day and night. She will have to put up with the crying, falling, disturbing, even dirtying, etc. All is for the good of the child. We never consciously think how a father or mother in a family have to stay on being vigilant, alert and watchful of all the affairs of their daily life. This is literally called staying on. Now you see, dear friends, when Jesus is on the mountain with the three disciples, John, James and Peter, he is transfigured. While Jesus was praying, his whole body filled with light. It must have been a marvelous sight to behold. Only a few get that privilege. Other disciples did not get. Prayer enlightens the one who prays and spreads the light to the one who is with praying person. When one prays, there cannot be class conflict, there cannot be fights. There can be only awe and glory. When we pray, there is always light. There cannot be darkness. Our being is enlightened. Praying is always a way to light. Jesus came into this world to bring light, and he is the light of the world. Now, prayer can bring light to the darkness of our life. Praying community is an enlightened community. There is no darkness in it. And therefore, our parish community must become the light city which cannot be hidden. As Jesus himself says, a city built on a hill cannot be hidden. cannot be hidden. And then we find Peter speaking. Peter was ecstatic. He uttered words of wisdom and he was lifted up from the ordinary sense of experience. He could not believe his eyes. He saw something which he had not seen. Perhaps he was not even aware what he was talking. On certain occasions, dear friends, in our life, we become ecstatic. These are momentary experiences. When we are ecstatic, we utter words perhaps we do not mean anything. For example, whenever we celebrate our birthdays, our feast days, our jubilee days, we utter all praises. Nothing bad comes from our mind or mouth. All seems well, right? This experience is momentary. Soon the light will fade and we will be thrown into ordinary situation of life. That is the time we really live our life. Yes, Peter was ecstatic. And what does he say? Let us build 3 booths, one for you, Lord, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. What are these booths? When we are well grounded on a place, then we think of booths, right? Booths signify security. But look at Peter. He is not bothered about himself or his companions. He wants to build booths for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. This is the true spirit of any consecrated person. We need to build booths for Christ and for people around us. Whatever we have, it is from Christ, from God. And therefore, we need to build what we call booths. Booths means, assuring someone who is in uncertainty. So, Peter wants to build booths. That's a good idea. Very generous of him. And then we see something extraordinary happening. There is the cloud. There is a great significance to the cloud. Cloud is always identified with mystery. When we say the day is cloudy, we do not seem to be very happy about it. Here, there was a cloud overshadowing the apostles. They were afraid. Now a question, don't we have clouds in our life? Whenever we encounter strange situations and circumstances, whenever we find it hard to understand the other person in the community or in our family, in our neighborhood, in our workplace, when there are insecure moments of relationship, we seem to be surrounded with clouds. But in these clouds, we need to hear a voice because there is a purpose for everything. The voice tells us not to listen to anybody but to the voice of God. Often in our life, we try to listen to others rather than to the voice of Christ through the Word of God and through our daily prayer. We are too much opinion-centered and we become slaves to the gossips of other people around us. Of course, when there was this cloud, there was fear. When there was the voice of the Father. The voice of the Father made the 3 disciples fear and tremble. That was the worldly fear. Dear friends, the voice of the Father evokes fear in us when we are not fully God-centered. When we are self-centered, we are always afraid. Only Jesus did not fear. The voice of the Father can be heard in our lives through many ways. In the cry of our own community members who are seeking justice, the cry of our neighbors and cry of those poor people around us. But then there, Jesus always intervenes and says to us, do not be afraid. The assuring words of Jesus strengthened the disciples. They were assured and cared for by Jesus. This is the true way of our life that is dedicated to God. We need to be like Jesus, assuring others in our community, in our family, in our neighborhood. We are called to fill others with courage. It is a sad experience that we who are supposed to be the happiest people, very often we feel sad. We who are supposed to be like Jesus, trying to solve problems of other people, perhaps we never succeed in solving our own problems. At times it happens in our lives. How can we then solve the problems of others? How can we say to others, do not be afraid? Well, it comes to us through our contact with God. And then the final part of this passage, they come down the mountain after this marvelous experience of ecstasy, light, awe, and the presence of God. Jesus did not allow them to continue this experience because such experiences should not be continued. Rather, they should bring us to the ordinary level. When we live in this world, heavenly experiences do not last long because we are in our bodies. Spiritual experiences cannot be long lasting unless otherwise willed by God Himself. We need to come down to ordinariness of our life, to our daily realities. The daily life with all its challenges, risks, pains and sorrows is truly the life of this world. When we are strengthened in the grace, we can come down to daily realities of life. We must be grounded in our daily life. When coming down the mountain, Jesus strictly warned the disciples not to tell about what had happened on the mountain. He did not want a fantastic experience to prolong or to be advertised. Rather, asked them to keep it a secret until He is raised from the dead. He wanted to be real. Hence, He tells His disciples that the Son of Man must suffer and must die, and He will rise again. Dear friends, too many of us resist authenticity, preferring instead an airbrushed approach to the world. This is easy to do since we live in a time where our values and our vision of reality are influenced and shaped by images that are unreal and false. Very often we watch popular television shows and we come away thinking that everyone is supposed to be young, beautiful, thin and rich, powerful. We have a false view of a world created by exhausted Hollywood values. We create fantasies for ourselves based on what I call false realities. Too many false things imbibed on a day-to-day basis, and eventually we become naive in our approach to realities of daily life. Dear friends, let this transfiguration experience of the blessed Lord, as we meditate in this second Sunday of Lent, inspire us during this period of Lent to renew ourselves spiritually so that we could have a deeper insight into all things that happen around us. May the Lord help us to get transfigured in our thoughts, in our relationship, and in our prayer life, and thus help us come closer to the resurrection of the blessed Lord, to experience His peace in the depth of our heart and share that peace to others around us. God bless you.